I'd like to welcome you all to the AMREP precinct, where we are about to unashamedly expose you to an hour and a half of propaganda of the highest quality to try and convince you all that your honours years should be spent at this campus rather than at Clayton or elsewhere. My name is Steve Jane. I'm head of the Central Clinical School, which is one of the two schools on this precinct, the School of Public Health and Preventative Medicine, headed by John McNeil being the other. But a number of years ago, we decided that we should have a unified forum for our honours night. And although I head that, standing here as the head of the Central School, I represent our partners on the precinct, which includes the Baker Institute for Cardiovascular and Diabetic Disease, the Burnet Institute for Infectious Diseases, and of course the Alfred Hospital Clinical Service. And essentially the four of these form the four research pillars at this precinct, and there are opportunities in any of the four to do additional studies with honours or higher degree researching PhDs. So the program, I'm going to give you a welcome and introduction. I'm then going to pass over to Professor Sharon Lewin here, who's Professor Director of Infectious Diseases at the Alfred Hospital, one of Australia's foremost clinician scientists, particularly in the area of HIV. In fact, Sharon is chairing the World HIV Congress in Melbourne next year and has routinely been spotted with Bill Gates and Bill Clinton of late. So she has incredible international pedigree, and she will talk about clinical research opportunities. Next to her is David Curtis, who again is a tremendous clinician scientist, a haematologist, who will talk about more basic biology, which is certainly on offer here, as well as the clinical opportunities. And then we're going to have some words from Jody Abramovich, who's a PhD student, talking about her experience of honours on the precinct, and Associate Professor Mark Wright, who's the honours coordinator here, who will give you facts and figures and everything that you need to know about potentially doing honours. After this, we have displays outside. All of the partners and many of the individual laboratories have got representatives here who are postdocs, principal investigators, honours students, PhD students. There's a whole range of people you can talk to about the experience of working on the precinct. And then there are some lab tours after that you can go and actually look at the geographical circumstances that you'd be located in. There's some beautiful laboratories on the precinct with views over Faulkner Park and so on. So if the science is boring, there's always something to look at out the window. And finally, we're having some pizza and refreshments to round off the night. So I do welcome you all. I know a lot of you have made the trip from Clayton and elsewhere. We're grateful, and we certainly hope to make the experience something that gives you something to think about when you're choosing where you're going to work next year. So I think the real point of difference that I want to emphasise of coming to this precinct is that this really is a translational research precinct. Most of the lead investigators here are clinicians or have strong collaborative links with clinicians, and that means that the interface between their science and a patient is much, much closer. The distance is very short. And really, I think everybody thinks about their science here in terms of what impact it can make to patient situations. How can it improve diagnosis? How can it alter management? How can it improve the human condition? And I think that is a really important point of difference between Clayton, which does magnificent science, but probably lacks that ability to have the direct translational aspects, which there's no question comes from sheer proximity. We sit here, the Alfred Hospital sits right there. But also the type of people who lead the research effort here, people like Sharon and David, who are clinicians by nature. So I think that is a real point of difference, and even the departments, and there are many of them that are not headed by clinicians, have a strong clinical focus and clinical links at the hospital. So I think this really, one of the compelling reasons that you would consider here is that you think that translational research, the ability to make a difference in human health, is one of your major drivers. That is a good reason to come here, I think. So, as I said a number of years ago, we decided to make this night really as a shop front, rather than having every individual institute have their own night, their own speakers and so on. Really, this is Myers Windows. You can come here and you can get an entree into cardiovascular medicine, into diabetes, cancer, haematology, infectious diseases, immunology, gastroenterology, public health, and so on. It's all available to you. It's all outside. We're just going to give you some generic overviews without focusing on any individual areas at this seminar, but afterwards you'll have the opportunity to delve into the areas that you may be interested in the rooms that are outside. As I said, the advantages here are the proximity to the hospital, the affiliation with patients, the links with clinicians, and all of these I think are certainly dear to our hearts, and we think that it's an emerging theme for young scientists, that the esoteria of science is really gone these days. It's demanded by the NHMRC and the other funding organisations that our work translates into outcomes. And I think students are really looking forward to that. Many of you go into science with a view to try and help humanity. And I think this is certainly a place that gives you the opportunity to do that. We love you to come and do honours. We love it even more if you stay on to do PhDs. And so certainly we'll be discussing the option of looking at this as a career path for you. And I think that's another important thing to think about, that when you look ahead to what your career opportunities might be in science, that the exposure to translational research is a real bonus for you. A lot of you may not go on to do PhDs, many of you might decide to go into industry, education, media, and the ability to interface with research and medicine is very important, and I think you will get that grounding here that you won't get in other areas. So one of the huge selling points for us is the environment. I don't need to sell you that apart from these photos. Magnificent Albert Park Lake, Paran Market, Chapel Street, sensational shopping. And I always like to say, I sound like a real estate agent, I love to contrast with Clayton. And this is really what you get out at Clayton. You get Dandenong Road with trucks, warehouses and other things. So I think if you just compare and contrast those two slides alone, there are compelling reasons to come to the AMREP precinct, in addition to the science that I think I've already exposed you to. One of the concerns that people have is that they have to leave the mothership at Clayton. It's a bit of a concern. They worry that it's going to be an isolated procedure at AMREP, but I can tell you that our honours numbers are increasing year by year. And I think this is the mosh pit last year of the honours celebration with about 10,000 honours students on the precinct. So there's no shortage of people to work with, to talk about your research, to socialise with, to collaborate with. We really have a vibrant undergraduate program here now for honours students. So I think that idea of being separated from Clayton is really no longer a worry, and we have great pastoral care and oversight of our honours programs here. So I've probably babbled on enough. I think with that introduction, I'll pass you over now to Professor Sharon Lewin, as I said, one of Australia's foremost clinician researchers in the area of infectious diseases, and she's going to give you the clinical perspective about research at AMREP. Thanks, Sharon.
Great.